Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session here. This is our webinar Wednesday. And for anyone who is joining us live or joining us here in our Zoom call, please feel free to keep yourself on video if you'd like, or you can drop off video at any time. I always, at the end of our sessions, if you're in our Zoom session, we'll have you definitely come on video in the end so we can interact and chit chat. So it's really just a personal preference. Anyone who's watching this as a broadcast and you're watching this out in the world, I appreciate you joining us today because I think this is a really fun and exciting topic. I think this is a topic that I think for a lot of people, there's questions around because as more and more of us go digital, as more and more of us have been kind of pushed into this online world of running our businesses, what I have found is there's a lot of questions that are coming up as far as how do I take payments? How do I process payments? How do I make this process easy so that I'm not feeling like I'm pulling out my hair? I'm not bugging my customers, following up with them. And also, just as everything in our business, I want everyone out there to have a few less headaches in your business. So, what I'm hoping we can do today is kind of talk about some of the challenges that many people face when they're making this transition to the online space, especially when it comes to collecting payments. And I can give you some ideas, some inspiration, and some recommendations on things that you can do to make this process a lot more streamlined. All right. So as we're transitioning over, no matter where you are, if you're on YouTube watching this or in Zoom, I do take questions during the presentation. I will go through the slides and break at the end as well. But if you have a question or something pops up in the meantime, please feel free to post it. I love to be able to answer them for you. All right. So as we dig into today's session, it's not just about the idea that we're all going digital. We're all, in many cases, in remote locations collecting money that maybe you might have been collecting in person before, or if you're still doing a few things in person or in retail or in certain environments, the idea is that there's becoming more and more demand for things like contactless payments. There's more and more requests for payments in a multitude of ways that payments can come in. And what I want you to do today is kind of take away some ideas on what you should be setting up, what you should be considering. I'm going to give you a couple of different platforms that I recommend, but I want you to also personalize this. The invoicing platform that I may recommend may work great for you, or you may already have your own invoicing platform. And what I'm going to do is kind of challenge you to relook at that platform, relook at the tools that you're using, and make sure you're maximizing what they have to offer, the features. Because a lot of times when we set these things up, we set them up and forget them. And what we don't do is we don't go back and make sure we're using the latest and greatest. And a lot of platforms have made a ton of changes this year in 2020. And I just want to make sure you're taking advantage of them. Now, for some of you, maybe this is the first time you're seeing one of my webinars or first time here, so welcome. Anyone who has been here before, welcome back. And as many of you know, I've been kind of running Vegan Mainstream since 2009 as a business to really design to help vegan entrepreneurs and business owners out there. Our goal is to offer things like these webinars to really inspire you, to help you, and to give you specific tangible tips and ideas that you can use in your business. So we really are excited to be able to offer these once a month. We're really excited to be able to bring this information to you and also be able to support you along your journey. All right. So when we talk about getting paid faster, how does that work? What has to happen? What's the key ingredient? And the reality is, to truly get paid faster, you just have to make it easier to collect your money. You have to make it easier for people to pay you. And I know sometimes it feels weird in this money space. In general, some of us don't have a great relationship with money. We kind of tense up. We have a hard time asking for it. We have a hard time charging for it. In some cases, maybe have a hard time charging what's really your value for the work that you do. So I know sometimes these discussions, when I talk about the money, some people get a little uncomfortable. Also, for many of us kind of in this vegan world and vegan space, if we were all independently wealthy, we'd probably work for free. We would just help people because the reality is we really do a lot of the work we do from our hearts. So when we start thinking about the money, sometimes it feels a little weird. It feels a little uncomfortable to get into some of these discussions because, our hearts are not around just the bottom line or what the numbers say or just how much money we make. We really are concerned about the impact. But what I want to do today and what I want to encourage you to do today is to remember that for your business to be healthy, for your business to sustain the challenges that we've already sustained here in 2020, and who knows what may come. And I don't mean that as a, oh goodness, what may happen next, but more of a, I guess, more as commentary on the idea that I want you to build a level of resilience in your business. That comes with creating great processes around getting paid and making the process not feel cumbersome for your customers, not feel like it's a lot of work for them, or making it feel like they have to jump through hoops or the process that you put in place to get paid. And therefore, it's a little bit difficult for them to do it. Now, I don't want to make it sound like you're just going to open up every avenue and, people can pay you however they want. We got to find that balance. But what I find is the balance that I would recommend is you're really going to need to be in a couple of different platforms. And today I want to walk you through some of that I think you should really be in. So the baseline tools that I recommend when you're trying to get paid, especially in this digital space and get things up and running, is having a PayPal account, having an account on Stripe, and Stripe is, I'll mention it in a few minutes, but it's just a tool similar to PayPal that allows you to collect credit card payments. Having ZELLE set up so that people can pay you directly to your bank account, having Cash App set up so you can get instant payments as well, and then having some type of invoicing software. Now, the reason why I like for people to have invoicing software, not only is this important for my coaches out there, for many of you that are individuals that are maybe sending people an invoice for your time or for your program because you're going to be working with them. I also want kind of everyone to have an invoicing software option, because what I find is that every once in a while, you still need to invoice someone, even when you have products. Maybe if you're selling them as wholesale, maybe someone's going to be purchasing a couple of cases of a product. A lot of times invoicing is going to help you with these ad hoc requests that you get so that you don't have to set up a whole, point of service platform to manage things, but you can actually do a lot of this through using tools like invoicing software. Okay, and we'll talk about some of the options as well as I'd love to hear some of the things that everyone's using. Okay, now PayPal. I am personally not a huge fan of PayPal. It's just me personally. I prefer to use credit card. I just prefer that process. But my clients love PayPal. My clients, a ton of them will only pay me in PayPal. And I bring that up because for some of you out there, is I don't want you to be resistant to these options. I don't want you to feel like I don't like PayPal, so I don't get on PayPal. I don't like the way they do things. And the thing we have to be careful about when we run our businesses is that we put too many of our own blinders on of the things we don't like. Because if you have a significant amount of your customers that just prefer to pay you that way, I highly recommend you set up that tool. Because the concept is that you're trying to make it easier for your customers. You're trying to make it so it's simpler for them to process that payment. Now, yes, it can really be a catch-22. It can really feel like, what do I do? How do I do all of this? And I completely understand the idea that, oh my goodness, Stephanie, you just gave me 4 to 5 things to set up. But what I want you to do is not spend a whole bunch of time setting all this up. I want you to set it up in stages, number one. Number two, remember when you set up some of these things, they're already done. So it's not like you have to keep setting up Stripe. It's not like you have to keep setting up ZELLE or Cash App. So the good thing about it is some of these platforms, once you've invested the time to get them up and running, you don't have to keep doing it. You don't have to kind of keep working through that process. Also, what's nice about most of these tools, as opposed to like years ago, is you used to have to do what they called merchant accounts. And merchant accounts used to charge you just to be able to collect money. So they used to charge you like 20 bucks a month or 30 bucks a month. And I would really used to be kind of frustrated with that because it was like, oh my goodness, I had to pay and I didn't even know if money was coming in. And now with most of these accounts, they don't pay you unless money does come to you. And what I find is that is one of the best things to do and the best ways to set up your payment processes so that you aren't paying a lot for this process. Now, a question came in and I just wanted to make sure I comment on it. It's about the kind of catch 22 idea that, business is when a business is very new, and you don't have that many paying customers yet, is it wise to set up all these services when you don't have much coming in? And the reality to me is yes, you want to set these services up now and in the beginning because PayPal and Stripe are very universal. These are platforms that for many of us, you're going to be using for the next couple of years. You're going to be using them in different capacities over the years. And what I'd rather you do is while things are maybe a little bit quieter when you're starting your business, while things, and I mean quieter relative, because when you're starting a business, there's a gazillion things to do. But while you don't have the demand of maybe customers yet, I love for people to get a lot of this setup out of the way. And most of this setup doesn't take hours and hours to do. So that's the one good thing is a lot of these platforms are becoming a lot easier to set up. Now, I would definitely, like I said, prioritize. So some of this has to do with the way you collect money naturally. Start with the platform that is natural. So if you're collecting money because you're doing online cooking classes, then you may be using something like Eventbrite and you just want to get that set up first. That's stage one. Then stage two are these items. If you're doing something like you're selling services on your website, what I want you to do is set up the kind of complimentary payment option for that service first and then round it out. And I give that example because for a lot of people, you may not need invoicing right away, but I eventually want you to get to it because what I don't want to happen is that you have an opportunity, you have a partnership, you have somebody who's even going to hire you to do a speaking engagement, as an example. And they say, okay, great, I'll send you the money for the speaking engagement, but can you invoice me so I have a track record? I don't want you to have to spend a ton of time under pressure to be able to send out an invoice tonight or tomorrow in a timely manner because you don't have this in place. And I just want to give you those examples because those are the things that are outside of sometimes the ordinary process in our business, like speaking engagements, that we wouldn't think of having these accounts in place for, but they can really help when people want to pay you to speak. And I mean that even while we're in these remote scenarios, while we're in these scenarios right now, while we are socially distanced, I'm actually getting paid for training and speaking engagements now. And I have to use many of these platforms that I use to actually get paid for that activity. Okay. Now, you already preempted me with your question there, Stacy, but the idea is for many of us, we always say, do I really need all these tools? And I normally go through this is that you need it because your customers need so many options. What happens is as your customer base expands, you're going to have people who are going to be a little bit more digital, a little bit more tech savvy. You're going to have people that their businesses have requirements that they need an invoice number to be able to send that information to you. And you're going to start to have all different types of requests. Some people are going to want to send what we call ACH payments, which is a cash payment that directly comes out of an account. And you're going to need a way to facilitate that. So what I want to make sure is you set that up. Now, here's the key. In many cases, we'll use a platform like PayPal. And I'm going to jump ahead to one of my slides really quick, where you can have a platform like PayPal that can solve many of those things for you. I just find for a lot of people, they haven't spent the time to learn that PayPal can do a lot of different things. And like I mentioned before, it's not my favorite platform personally, but PayPal can allow you to do reoccurring invoicing. PayPal will allow you to do invoicing. There's a lot of customers or my clients that I've talked to and I've been teaching lately that if you have to invoice somebody, you can invoice them from PayPal. You don't have to have a third-party system. The other thing you can do with PayPal is obviously not only collect money, you can collect money on your website. So depending on how your website's set up, most websites will allow you to collect payments via PayPal. And all you have to do is put in your PayPal email address, and then they'll send that money over to you. And then in the example that I wanted to talk about today is PayPal has come out with a new kind of feature, what they call contactless payments. Now, this is really important for many of you that are maybe still in kind of environments. You're doing things like farmers markets. You're still doing events, just on a smaller scale than you've done before. Maybe you're doing pop-ups. Maybe you're actually still running kind of a retail location, or maybe you're doing drop-off. You're doing meal plans or you're creating food and you have to drop off the food for individuals. And what you want to do is cut down on handling cash, cut down on handling credit cards. You can use PayPal. PayPal has this great system where you basically just print out a QR code. You can set it up and a person can scan it. Once they scan it, and they're in their PayPal account, they can type in the amount to send to you, hit a button, and that money will be sent directly to you. So this is a great way to take a platform that you might already know and love and do more with it in today's environment. Make it easier for you to service different customers by really kind of paying attention to these new tools, these new ways that you can use these. I've also used PayPal, and not so much these days because, I'm not physically going to events, but when I used to go to events and let's say, for example, if we were selling something on site, and I do this mostly when I was supporting my clients, maybe they were doing book signings and I was going to help them with the processing, we would use PayPal to swipe the credit card. So instead of having our own credit card machine, we'd still use PayPal. So I bring that up so that you start to look at the tools that you're using and see if they can facilitate the need that you may need to either be contactless, to be able to offer an invoice, reoccurring, and so forth. Okay. The other thing I want you to really think about are these instant payment tools. This is something that's, I would say, fairly new in the business world. They've been out there for a while. There's been a lot of different ways that people can do instant payment, and it's kind of how like PayPal initially started. But as PayPal has grown over the years, PayPal really feels more like you have to have a PayPal account or functioning kind of PayPal account to really be able to process payments. And a lot of tools have kind of stepped in the meantime to allow us to just send cash to friends, to just send cash to someone kind of on a whim. But what I found over the years is this has evolved into the business world, that what's happening is people want to be able to send cash to me quickly. Someone wants to be able to book an event or book me for a session or to be able to send a payment for something. And what I found is having a tool like this, especially at least one of these instant payment options available, has been key. I've also used this so I can pay people. I had to do a photo shoot this year, and one thing that I found was really great is so that I could pay the photographer, we use ZELLE as a way for me to pay them. So it was really kind of a wonderful way for me to not only have it set up so that I could collect money, it helped me so I could pay. And what I really love about most of these platforms is not only they allow you to collect payment anytime. So if you are doing things like you're doing drop-offs, if you're doing things where people are picking up food from a central location, picking up product from a central location, you're dropping things off. If people make last minute orders or last minute changes to their orders, you can use instant payments as a way to manage some of that last minute addition or changes to an order. But what I love about this is because it's not really platform specific. You don't have to like have a PayPal account. You don't have to, have an account that you're really kind of logging into to use as long as it's connected to a person's bank account. And what I really love about things like Cash App is you could just send someone the money in Cash App or just send some of the money in ZELLE, and then they go in and connect it to whatever bank account that they want to. It makes it less of a discussion about, do you have PayPal? Do you have this? Do you have that? And then also many of these platforms don't really charge a lot of fees. Now, Cash App, if you have a business account, does charge fees. But what I find is this is a great way to collect money without the fees spinning out of control, and a great way to have a backup plan if you do a lot of drop-off services and so forth. All right. The other thing I want you to think about is I want you to think about getting paid kind of in advance and making sure that you're integrating your payments with the tools that you're already using. For anyone out there who are coaches, anyone who out there who does consults, or anything where you're getting paid for your time. So someone is actually going to say, can I book time with you? And you have an hourly rate as an example. And maybe in the past, you might have been meeting with people. Maybe you were going in their home. You were helping people with, let's say, interior design. Maybe you were helping people in coaching. Maybe you're doing tutoring services, any of those types of services. What I'd like for you to do is also consider getting paid while people book those appointments with you. For a lot of people, it's kind of a two-step process. Someone will send you an email, say they want to meet with you, then you book the time, then you want to send them an invoice or you want to collect the money after the session, or you're trying to figure out, should I collect it before or how should I do it? And what I've found to help create transparency and also make it a little bit easier when it comes to getting paid is to allow people to pay while they're booking. Now, I use Calendly for my booking. So I use that when someone wants to book a 1-hour consult with me. And while they're booking, it shows them the price of the consult. And after they book their time, it'll take them, and I use Stripe at this point, to process the payment. So they can put in their credit card information, and then the payment and everything is done. All of that is taken care of before we even get on the phone. So what's nice is I don't have to have these like awkward discussions or conversations about, well, how do you want to pay? I know you've booked for this time and so forth. Now, I use Calendly also without the payment feature, so it doesn't have to be that way. And if you're using a totally different software to schedule your appointments, see if your scheduling software allows you to process payments in the back end, because you don't have to use Calendly. But I find this is really helpful so that I can get paid anytime. I used to have, that process where you go back and forth on email and people will say 2 o'clock, no 3 o'clock, no 4 o'clock. And I would just not only spend so much time doing that, but like in days like today where I have a meeting at 11:30, then I go live at 1 o'clock, and then I do a webinar here at 2 o'clock. I'm not in my computer and in my email for hours. And if people are looking for a response on when I'm available and when they can book, they have to wait until I'm free again. Where now, by having the schedule published online, by having a link set up, someone can book me for a consult at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 1 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock their time, even if they're in a totally different country. And I find that's a great way when you're running your business to be able to get paid faster and easier. All right. Now, I have 2 more slides I just want to go through, and then we're going to open things up for questioning. But I just want to talk about kind of the process of not just collecting the money, but tracking the money. One of the things I think that can be very hard, especially if you're in a service-based business. If you're in a business where you're not only doing coaching and consulting, but maybe you get hired and you have retainer agreements. So you give someone a proposal. Based on that proposal, they'll say, okay, great, I'll give you the money, and they pay that money up front. And then you have to invoice against that retainer agreement as one option. The other thing that happens sometimes is maybe I have clients, and maybe you have this too. We have clients that I meet with almost every single week. So we have an ongoing kind of consult meeting, but because it's ongoing, they're not necessarily paying for it in advance. What used to happen is I would like invoice them after the fact, or I'd invoice them later. But one of the challenges I used to have is I had a really hard time of tracking my days, because days like today, I'm just running from meeting to meeting to meeting, that if I had to invoice someone to the end of the month, I had to remember during our meeting, did we meet for an hour? Did we meet for 45 minutes? Did we go over? And it was an hour, 15 minutes. And what I found is I needed to find a tool that would allow me to track my time and invoice that time. Now, that was great for me as a consultant, but if you have a team, say you do website design, say you do things where your team supports people, and there's 3 or 4 different people that are allocated as far as hours or time to help and support your clients. Having software that will allow you to track all that information and then automatically turn that into an invoicing process is another great way to get paid. And one thing I wanted to show with Harvest, this is the tool that I use and absolutely love, is it has this little tool that you can see in the box at the top with the blue in the background, where I can put a timer on my computer. I can click on that timer and I can actually hit the start button. So say I'm doing a consult where I meet with a client every single week and I just invoice them for the amount of time for those consults. We normally book an hour, but sometimes we go under, sometimes we go over, or sometimes we change. And what I'll do is I'll use my timer and click start when I start the session. And at the end of the session, I hit stop. And this little timer that sits on my computer, not only does it allow me to track the amount of time, I can actually allocate it to a project. And I know it's not 100% super clear, but hopefully you can see it on your screen. And what it'll allow you to do is pick the project it's allocated to. You can even put notes in there. And that way I can track the amount of time for each individual client that I'm using. This also works for people who pay me in advance. Maybe I do a coaching program and I work with people for over a 3-month program. What I used to find is I didn't have a sense of how much time I spent with my clients, how much time that I allocated or estimated it took me to support my clients versus how much time it actually takes. So I started using these timers not just when I was invoicing people, but to get a sense for how many hours I was using. And what it allowed me to do is be able to get a sense of, am I in the ballpark? Am I in kind of the general sense of what I've thought I would do? All right. So that's one thing I want you to start to think about. I want you to consider. All right. Now, we had a question come in and it talked about instant payment sites. It talks about the concerns of leaving your bank account kind of vulnerable to online hackers and theft and so forth. And absolutely, I can completely understand that concern. And I'm so glad, Stacey, that you asked that question because it's an important one. So the number one thing is choosing your software wisely. There's only certain software I use and certain companies I work with when I'm doing invoicing and when the money is coming into my bank accounts. Okay. So when we're talking about the money coming in, a company like ZELLE is very reputable. I haven't heard any issues really with it, and it works with most of my bank accounts, which I feel really confident with. Like I have USAA and so forth. And with many of them, I'm very confident about that information. Also understanding that these systems are not a person can truly like pull the money out of your bank account necessarily. They can only send a request and you have to actually approve it. And even with accounts like PayPal, accounts like Stripe, I've been using those for years. I haven't had any issues with them. Now, I definitely am sure and know that there's horror stories out there of things that have happened. But most of the time, when I find that people are being hacked, where people are getting into individuals' accounts, it's not normally the software itself, it's our password management. That's the problem. For a lot of us, we will use the same password on all of these accounts. So if you have your PayPal account, if you have your Stripe account, if you have your Cash App account, I don't want you to use the same password on all of these accounts. I don't want you to use a password that's very common that you use anywhere. And what I really don't want you to do is have like passwords that you keep in like a spreadsheet. Excuse me. Or you send people or email out your password because you're trying to let someone else be able to access your account. What I find is it's password management that causes most of the theft and most of the problems when it comes to this. So for most people, what I recommend is investing in a password software. I use a software called 1Password. It's not crazy expensive, at least in my mind. They have like an individual plan. I think it's like $3 a month. And then they have a business plan, which I think is like $4 a month. And I find it's a great way to make sure every single account has a different password and also that you update and change those passwords And I find it's a great way because the way these password tools work, and there's a ton of them out there. It's not one password's not the only one that you can use. But what's great about these the software is that you can install the software like on a desktop, but you can also have download their app. And that way you'll have your passwords with you when you travel on your phone or when you're on your tablet or when you're on a laptop. And you don't have to like email yourself your passwords or text your passwords to yourself, because that's often I find where a lot of that vulnerability happens. So I highly recommend making sure that you invest in a password management software, because that's going to save you from a lot of these headaches. The other thing that I do just as kind of peace of mind, and I don't know if any of you do this out there, but when it comes to managing my bank accounts, managing what's going on in my bank accounts and what's happening in my bank accounts, um, is number one, I also have a bank account for my business. I don't know how many of you out there do, and I know for some of you, you're like, I'm just getting started. I don't know if I'm going to have time or be able to do that. But I highly recommend having a separate bank account for your business than for your personal account. Some of this is just, it's just going to make it easier when you have to do all your accounting and everything. It also helps from that standpoint of fraud, um, and things that can go wrong. I like to kind of keep Mamana separate, and it helps keep it safe. Even if you don't have a branded account, meaning it's a business account, I tell a lot of people to create two bank accounts in your, even if they both have your name on them, but only use one for your business and only use one for yourself. And I find that's such a great way to keep these things separate. And then the account that you're using for your business, most of your bank accounts these days will send you a notification every day of your balance. And what I like to do is I like to get that message normally early in the morning, if you can set it for early in the morning. And by getting my balance every day, I have a sense of what's happening in my bank account. It also keeps me from having to like nervously go in there and see, did a payment come through or did this happen or anything happened in my bank account? It gives me a proactive approach to knowing what's happening in my account, what's happening with my balances, and if I do see any irregularities. Now, there are issues on the other side when you have a, kind of debit card connected to your bank account, but that's a little different than these items. And those cards are protected in a totally different way. Most of your accounts will send you emails for fraud alerts and all that good stuff. So I really feel like you will be secure, but I highly recommend that you don't just pick any any invoicing software, that you pick software that has been approved, that has partnerships, and most of the software that's going to be working with PayPal and Stripe are going to be platforms that have a certain level of security so that information is protected. So I really feel like you should feel confident moving forward. Okay. And the last slide I just wanted to mention here is websites. Because we've talked about these tools independently. We talked about them using them on your phone. We talked about things like QR codes if you're physically, have to be in person with someone and you want to be able to do contactless, but at the same time, you want to be able to kind of collect instant payments. But for some of you, it's going to be about collecting your payments online. It's going to be about collecting payments on your websites. And for many of you, you're going to be able to lean into the platform that you have. So if your website's already on Squarespace, Squarespace does have a e-commerce kind of component to their site. It's a little more expensive than their standard site. Same thing with Weebly. You can do a free account, but if you go to a paid account, then often you can get this kind of e-commerce opportunity to be able to collect payments. And for many of you, I really think that's going to be worth it. Now, once again, that's going to be a little more expensive. That's a little different than what we talked about earlier, where if you're just going to be invoicing people and getting started. And for some people, it's the best way to get started, that you'll set up something like Calendly, because you don't have to take on the heavy expense of putting an e-commerce platform in place. Calendly may cost you $15 a month for the scheduling software and the integration with Stripe, or something like this may cost you a little bit more and take longer to set up. So one thing I want you to do when you're thinking about getting paid is figuring out the balance between what the amount of money that you need to be able to collect, and how much time and effort it's going to take to get that up and running. Putting in kind of that website integration on your site is a little bit more of an overhaul. It's a lot more work. And in some cases, it might make sense to hire someone. Now, if you are looking for help, if you're thinking about hiring someone, I recommend finding freelancers to help you. Now, when you have a freelancer, just from a security standpoint that we talked about earlier, you don't give them your password to PayPal. You never give them the password to Stripe. If they need you to put information in the site, you ask them to tell you where that information should be inputted, and then you go in and add any of that information in. Do not share your passwords really with anybody. You really should kind of keep it in kind of a closed environment. If you do have a team, so say you have somebody who you hire that manages your website all the time, and you use a tool like 1Password, you can add someone as a guest on 1Password, and that way you can give them access to your passwords through a secure environment like 1Password, and they'll be able to log in. But I only recommend that for somebody that you work with for an extended period of time, for months, and that you know and trust. All right. Now, the other thing is we talked about sites like Squarespace and Weebly. They're great because you just have to activate their e-commerce functionality. But if you're on something like WordPress, then to bring in kind of that functionality, that integration, you're going to be looking at a tool like WooCommerce. Now, WooCommerce is great, but it is a little gritty. It is a little bit more work. It's not, I clicked 4 buttons and now I have an e-commerce site. So if you're technically inclined, it's going to be fairly easy to put it in place. If you're not, hire a freelancer. Let them help you set that up on your site. And the reason I kind of incorporate that into today's lesson is because when you use WooCommerce, WooCommerce is just managing the shopping cart experience. They're almost like kind of bringing the concept of like a Shopify into your WordPress site, but you still have to collect payments. And to collect payments, you're going to connect WooCommerce to PayPal. You're going to connect WooCommerce to Stripe. So it all comes full circle. You're all still using the same tools. You're just going to need another piece of software in that layer on top to allow you to process payments. So if you have a WordPress site and you're like, Stephanie, this is what I needed today. I needed to know, how do I collect payments on my site? WooCommerce is your answer, but I highly recommend you hire a freelancer. It should only take a week or two for them to help you get it set up and integrated in your site. And that way you'll be able to incorporate at least some payments on your website. And what I love about this is not only does it allow you to bring that e-commerce functionality into your site, but it allows you to sell products and services. WooCommerce is great for this because if you have things like ebooks that you're selling, or you're doing like an online workshop, you can do that in WooCommerce and you can physically sell a book. They can even track the shipping for you. So what's nice about a lot of the great tools out there these days is they have that functionality. So always remember, like I had mentioned earlier about using the tool like PayPal to collect payments, that in many of these tools, when you have something you're trying to do, often you have to just relook at the tool and enable that feature that's going to allow you to do it. So if you've been mostly in the product space and you're saying, well, I want to offer more services now that we're all remote, we're all socially distancing, then if you have WooCommerce, you'll be able to do that. And with many of the other platforms, you'll be able to do it as well. So I just wanted to, I guess, spend a little time today giving you some of these ideas and recommendations. I know everyone who's watching is in totally different businesses. Some of you are physical products, some of you are services, some of you are one-time, some of you are high-end products, some of you are coaching, and some of you are invoicing and proposals. So I was hoping today to give you kind of a wide range of ideas and recommendations on what you could do and how you could collect payments. But what I also want to do is spend a little bit of time with anybody who's in my Zoom session today, and I'll answer some questions you may have. I want to spend some time kind of going a little bit deeper into maybe what you're doing. And what I can do is try to give you more recommendations on how you can get paid faster. So with that, I'm going to wrap up our broadcast version of this. So thank you everyone who's been watching us live. Thank you for your comments. I can see them in there, and I appreciate hearing that this has been helpful for many of you. So I'm really happy that you joined us. I'm really happy that you came with us today. Anybody who's in our Zoom session, please hang tight because I'm going to jump into our official Q&A session so that I can start answering your questions and making sure we apply this to you. So everyone who's been live streaming, it was great to see you, and we'll see you in the